A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Welcome to the show, and welcome to an evening I've been looking forward to for a little while now, because I have some rather influential and well-known people in the wine industry joining me today to let me know exactly what's going to happen in the world of wine in 2024. It's crystal ball time. Have we got an exciting and positive and uplifting year to look forward to? Or is it one that's going to be awash with challenges? I suspect the answer lies somewhere in the middle, but exactly how far to one side or the other of that scale will be seen on the course of this evening's show. If the wine I've drunk already in 2024, and there's no danger of a dry January in the Nickel household, is anything to go by, then it's going to be a terrific one. Some of the wine already drunk this year has been sensational. Just in the last couple of weeks, some 2007 Columella, some 2004 Delheim Cabernet Sauvignon, and last night, which was a real treat, had a couple of the cricketers around for dinner, and we opened some 1984 and 1974 Niederberg, and both of them were in magnificent condition, testament to the quality of wine of that particular era, but also South Africa as a whole. One of the guests was a New Zealander, very, very impressed with the caliber of South African wine. So I'm certainly off to a good start. I hope our guests are. And we're going to find out in just a moment as we delve into the world of South African wine with Siobhan Thompson, who joins us on the show again, Rico Basson, who joins us, Miguel Chan, le roi de Maurice, the Mauritian sommelier superstar, and making his long overdue debut. His agents are very difficult to deal with. We finally got him on the show. Evan Alexander, adding a dash of roguish good looks and charm to the show as well. They're coming up in just a moment with our preview of 2024. First of all, though, here's your latest wine news. This is new at Spear. It's their range of chocolate tasting, and they've added it to the list of attractions as if there weren't enough already at Spear. Well, now you've got another one to go with the great wine that sits under Franz Smit and team's remit, the chance to pair some of it with some chocolate. It's happened at a number of other estates over the years. This chocolate specially made to go with the selection of wines. So next time you are going wine routing, here's another good reason to add Spear to your list and see how that wine and chocolate pairs up. I shall be doing it, I think, in the next month or so, purely for research purposes, of course. I'll let you know how it goes as and when I get there. Now, this is for tomorrow evening, so not much time to sign up if you haven't already, but your chance to join the Belgians of Almenkirk as they venture north to Johannesburg. They will be at Norman Goodfellows tomorrow evening with the Norman Goodfellows team. That's the four-way store, and your chance to have a tasting. The Chardonnay, the Syrah they make, two of the wines. I particularly like that rosé we drank last year on a visit to Almenkirk. Also particularly good fun to drink. They're a really cool team. They're making some really nice wine, and one I would get to if you can. I sadly won't be there. I'm down in Cape Town for the next few days, but it is your chance to see the Almenkirk guys. There is a R100 fee that goes in its entirety to charity, and in return, you'll get some great snacks, great collection of wine, and an understanding of what it is that makes Almenkirk's wine from Elgin quite so distinctive. A birthday time. It is Jean Smit's birthday today, the man from Damascene, as passionate and dedicated and devoted a winemaker as I know. You get Jean started on the nature of his wine, and he can go on happily for hours, and he's a delight to listen to and a delight to spend time with. Just to be clear, that's Jean on the left in that photo, and a very happy birthday to the man behind Damascene. And also a very happy birthday to Aubrey Beerslaar into his last few months at Kanonkop. Aubrey is 50 today, so it's quite a landmark, and celebrating his 50th year by leaving Kanonkop. He'll still consult, as we mentioned on the show last week, but focusing on his Beerslaar wines. The new range is out, the Pinotage and the Chardonnay. We're going to be tasting that with Aubrey on the show next month. Now, happy birthday, Aubrey. I suspect there might be a bottle or two of rather good Kanonkop disappearing this evening. And one to look out for, it includes one of our guests today, Evan Alexander, together with Anne Krebel, who featured on the show last year, Corleo Furi, who is a regular, and Johan Jordan from Spear. They will be discussing, well, they have discussed the white wine report from Vinimark. As much as we make great red wine, it's white wine that makes up about 70% of South Africa's wine production. And so if you haven't seen that, it's a really interesting look at South African white wine, where it's gone, where it's going. So not dissimilar theme to our show this evening, one to catch up on when you've got a moment. So there we go. Plenty to look forward to, I suspect, in 2024. Already there have been changes in cellars, changes in the industry, changes at Singita, amongst others, with Francois moving on. We mentioned Arbery. Lots of things afoot. But what is the bigger picture going to look like? Is this a year that we can really put a smile on faces through wine with, both in terms of industry and consumer? Well, let's ask the people who know far more about these things than I do. It is a very warm welcome to the head of WOSA, Siobhan Thompson, making a happy return to the show. Rico Basson joins us as well from Wine SA, the Mauritian magician, Miguel Chan from Southern Sun, and Evan Alexander, Export Director at Vinimark. Guys, welcome to you all. Lovely to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us. I think the first thing to do, Rico, because we haven't had you on the show since you had to go and have all your business cards changed. So let's get a quick update. For those people who don't know about the new space, give us an update on what it is, why it came about, what you're doing, and how have the first few months gone?
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for having me back. We, as you know by now, we've established a new umbrella body for the sector called SA Wine, or South African Wine. And over the last 6 months, we have been busy reviewing, realigning, restructuring. But I think one can now see how we are more effective. Still a lot of work in the next 3 or 4 months as we delve into market potential and unpacking the domestic market potential and tourism. So a lot of emphasis on consumers and on growth, which is really the only way if we want to be in a better position. Production is important, but the consumer, as you will hear this evening, dictates where we are heading. So exciting times, great time for cleanup and new relationships. But we're in a good space, but a lot of hard work still to be done.
All right, so positive start, hard work. We'll find out what that hard work is in a moment. Siobhan, what about you? As we start off 2024, how much spring is in the step of wine in South Africa from your perspective on the back of 2023?
I think, Dan, after 2023, I've definitely had to find some spring. It was a very challenging year. I'm not fooled to think that 2024 is going to be a light and easy, fluffy year. I think we've got lots of challenges ahead, but one thing that I can always say about South Africans, we rise to the challenge, we find new ways of doing things, and we move forward. And I think, so I'm positive. I'm positive that what lies ahead will show how innovative we are and how creative we are, and will also show how strong the South African wine industry has become and how resilient.
I suspect that resilience will be needed once again in 2024, but it certainly is something we've shown to have had, and gee, we have needed it. The wines that you deal with mostly, Siobhan, are the ones that are being sent abroad. So let's touch on exports as we frame 2024 with a look at 23 through the eyes of someone who does this on a daily basis. Evan, was the export-based Christmas bonus seeing the Alexanders and Bahamas on holiday, or was it a slightly tougher year?
Not entirely sure. My wife hasn't spoken to me since Christmas Eve as a result of the export bonus. No, I'm kidding. It's I don't know, Dan. It's, as Siobhan said, it was quite a tough year. If you got up yesterday morning, I set my alarm for 4:30 to watch the Drinkers fight, and he only rocked up at 8:00. But thank goodness he did. And I think it's kind of similar. You know, we ended the year looking like he ended his night, and then I don't know if you saw him yesterday morning at the breakfast business. At the breakfast conference, but he looked a lot worse. So it was kind of ending off with a couple of cuts and a couple of bruises, and arriving in January feeling a little bit tender. But I guess just as last year, the only thing that really mattered was that Springboks winning the World Cup, so we can be happy. This year we started off with the world champions, so we should be excited and optimistic.
Well, the sense of humour is still in place, which is always a good sign. And Wine Like Sport, and I mentioned this at a dinner I was hosting last week, they are two spaces that do continually do us proud around the world. What about closer to home? A man who last had a holiday in 1983, works flat out round the clock on more hotels than I can name. Miguel Chan, Group Sommelier across the Southern Sun Group. Was it a furiously busy end to 2023, and has it laid a good domestic platform for us, Miguel, for the year ahead?
Yeah, hi Dan. First, thanks for having me on your show again. And yes, the hospitality industry is upbeat about 2024, especially with travel resuming fully. And we've seen leisure, corporate all back in center. And yes, no holidays for those of us that are in travel and in hotels. So we keep rolling, we keep selling wine, we keep creating experience. And we are very excited looking at what's coming in the next few months. South Africa definitely is an exciting destination on many aspects, not only for tourism, for conferences, even also we can look at the booming local market, the domestic market, especially in around Sandton, Hyde Park, Rosebank. These are the pockets where actions are happening. And yes, we are going to have a really good time. And the other great thing we've seen around 2023 is the wine industry have finally taken Johannesburg seriously. And we are seeing now on virtually every week, we are seeing winemakers, winery owners coming to Sandton, presenting their new vintages. And this is so cool to see it happening. So yeah, we're looking forward to lots of activity.
And of course, it is that local market that is so important. We do see some good signs from the international market. And Siobhan, if I think back, we had a similar conversation about a year or so ago. And if memory serves, some of the things we were looking at in 2023 were trying to continue to work out and crack the puzzle that is the American market, building up some of those international markets and dealing with some increased competition, especially from Australia, given their cool relationships with China and the extra wine they're in. Where lies for you the key challenge, but also key opportunity for our exporters in this coming year?
I think, Dan, the biggest challenge we face with it the moment is the global economic situation, and we've seen a downturn in terms of wine sales. So it's not just South Africa, it's our competition as well. Consumers drinking less but drinking up. And I think so the challenge is very much about staying relevant, making sure you don't drop your marketing, promote your brand, keep pushing quality, because I think that's the opportunity for South Africa. We're starting to get really good ratings, accolade, recognition. And I think one of the biggest things that's helped us is wine tourism. So markets like the USA, that really is it's a difficult market to break into. What has helped is all those flights coming in and the tourists coming to South Africa. Going back, talking about South Africa, the World Cup, winning the Rugby World Cup, winning old Drickus doing his thing for us at the beginning of this year. So it's about remaining relevant, keeping the quality and growing the quality of South Africa, and keep, even if you are limited in terms of what you can spend out there, but keep those promotions going and feet on the pavement. I think the United Kingdom for South Africa probably 5-6 years ago was a very challenging market, and we've seen our position change within that market. I think the UK in the past year, in 2023, was our star. We saw something like 17% value growth come through, and that's in a market that's, in times that were very tough. And we managed to gain a position overall in that market. So let's say we were ranked 7th amongst our competitors. We're now up to 6th. So the challenges are there in terms of we don't have the funds. We have a weak rand. But I think the positives and opportunities are that we've got a growing and relevant industry. We're going from strength to strength in the quality that we can put out there. And people are looking to South Africa now. We're exciting. We're winning competitions. We're making ourselves relevant. So I think there are a lot of gems out there that we can find. And I think true to South Africa's personality, we don't give up easily. We just keep going back. We keep trying. And I know 2023 knocked a lot of people. But when you speak to some producers, they say it was the best year they've ever had. So I just think keep optimistic, keep trying, just keep going, and make sure you get out into your markets and showcase the beautiful wines we have.
The line I like most there is the 17% value growth as opposed to simply volume. And I think that's such a key measurement and such an important one. Evan, in terms of that UK market in particular, the wine that I used to see when I went to the UK was pretty much bottom shelf stuff, and it was in the low price bracket, and it created a perception of South African wine that we've spent a lot of time trying to overcome. The export market as a whole, where are you seeing it going forward this year for South Africa? Are we seeing more countries understanding, accepting South Africa as a home to premium wine that they want to be part of?
Dan, you're right. I think it kind of links in quite a bit of what Siobhan said. It's, the UK, I know you're a fan of that Sharkers Rock or the Big Five that you bought at Tesco for £2.99, and I'm sure you said it's half full of it. It does feel like we've moved out of that. If you look at the sector that the UK is really under pressure on, it is that £6 to £9 sector that's suffering the most. Premiumization has been good, and when I say premiumization, that's just taking it sort of between that 12 to £18 mark. That's where the majority of the growth is in the UK, and still, I'd like to think from a South African perspective, fairly low-hanging fruit to build real brands there, not the concept brands that I mentioned earlier. Outside of the UK, it's always difficult when you look at stats. I'm always very, very pro the African market and how wine culture must develop in Africa, all the way up. People look at the stats of a country like Nigeria and the drinking population and the champagne stats that get sort of bandied around. But the simple reality is a lot of these markets have a lot of difficulty. The Naira devalued on over 24 hours last year. In June, it devalued by 80%. And that brings all sorts of other challenges. You look at the African economies that are doing well from a sort of a macroeconomic point of view, and the breweries are piling in there and creating a really wonderful beer culture. So there's opportunity. The Scandinavian markets are always fairly rich for South Africa, which is important. And I think, again, these sort of, I won't talk about the politics of those countries and everything else, but given the population, they tend to drink a lot of wine. And South Africa, certainly in a country like Sweden, has been really, really kind to South Africa over the last 20 years. But they too are struggling. The economy is struggling. They've got high interest rates, huge inflation. And again, the Swedish crown also devalued by about 10% last year. So it makes it difficult for the wine sector. Asia, we can probably debate on another occasion, but massive potential, but again, massive challenges. I think you mentioned in your intro that we were given a bit of a window of opportunity with the relationship with Australia. That looks like it will get mended this year to some extent. But the reality is that there's still a hell of a lot of wine sitting in warehouses in China that they need to work through before it's exciting on that very sort of big bulk level, where I see the opportunities being premiumization, certainly in Asia, less so in Southeast Asia, where there's a nice gap, and I think South Africa can play a role. And then America's got its challenges. It really does. It's a tough market. We've dipped below the 1% mark for the first time, I think, in a while. And certainly, if you look at them, wine consumption's gone down for 10. I think it's 10 out of 11 years. Wine consumption's been down. Domestic sort of sales out of California and Oregon, it was their worst domestic shipments in 20 years, which says a lot about what Americans are drinking. Bear in mind, the imported market is only 30% of consumption in America, and South Africa plays a tiny, tiny role in that. And again, it's all largely due to the economy and diversification out of wine. So there are challenges, but again, with that, probably following on from what Siobhan said and what I said earlier about resilience, that's where the opportunities are. We build great brands, we tell good stories, we've got a ridiculous quality of wine at still unbelievable value. It's about finding our comfortable place, and to me, that's not cheap of the cheap. It's about that middle ground, and certainly some of our top brands and top wine producers really playing in the premium sector. And that's where we're going to find great success.
The challenge and opportunity of the export market, that American one, also not helped by the fact that I think 48 of the American states are now producing wine. Texas, the fastest growing. People like Evan do have their work cut out for them in the year ahead. Which leads me, Erica, to ask you that question on export versus import collectively. Is one receiving a little more focus or attention than the other? And where do you think we sit as an industry in terms of pooling our resources and then focusing on home, on the rest of Africa, on the rest of the world? Where does the greatest opportunity lie for you? Rico?
Sorry, Dan, are you asking me? Sorry.
I was indeed.
Look, Dan, if your question is about imports, we import very little wine, purely due to parity. But the phenomena that we have seen this year, which has been interesting, is that Siobhan will tell you on export volumes, it's been probably the lowest volume in the last 10 years. But we are just about to see the highest volume sales in South Africa. Now, we could argue about that. It's about 450 million liters, which is quite unique. A lot of that has been bag in box. We spoke earlier about some of the cans that suddenly we see an uptick. But a lot of this also has to do with the challenges we have at the port and the cost of distribution. And I think a lot of the wineries has opted to go domestic, be that retail, wholesale. But with that, we have also seen full recovery now of tourism, which is something Miguel mentioned yesterday or earlier. And to me, it was interesting. I listened over the weekend to the Silicon Valley Bank report, and the Napa Valley reports that they see the lowest trend on tourism at those wineries. And we are seeing the inverse at this stage. We're seeing a boom. We're seeing a couple of unique things. And I believe most certainly that wine tourism is that subsegment that will continue growing exponentially. So there's a little bit of an uptick. So yeah, I think it's an interesting part. I love to look at our competitors often, and I must say, if for years and years we've been debating our composition of red versus white, or white versus red. As you know, we are a white producing country. And if I look at where we are now versus Australia that sits on swimming pools full of red, I actually think that we are very well positioned. And Siobhan will show you on her export stats, when we look at value growth, that we've seen fantastic price value growth on varietals such as Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and even Chenin Blanc and our white blends. So I would argue we could dip into some of the challenges, some of which are really material, such as the Cape Town port. But I would say that we, compared to our competitors, actually are not at a bad place. It is now how we take those opportunities in 24, which will still be geopolitically anyway a very, very tough year. I mean, half of the world is going to elections this year. So a lot of noise in the system. But yeah, I think we're not placed badly compared to others.
Very quickly, as you mentioned it, Rico, the port situation seems chaotic, and many people shaking their heads. Surely something can be done about it in terms that even somebody like me can understand. What exactly is the problem, and how do we go about solving it?
Sure, Dan. This is I'll keep it short because it's a long answer. I think obviously as wine, we don't have the seasonal peak that we see with fruit, and specifically the citrus fruit. But as I said here, the southeaster is pumping here in Paul, which means that the Cape Town port is not loading at the moment. It is a couple of things. I think we shouldn't underestimate the shipping disruption due to various geopolitical aspects. Wind has been a problem, but wind, I suppose, has been a problem for 365 years already. It is unfortunately operational inefficiency from Transnet. And whilst we stay in discussion with them, dealing with huge reputational issues as some of our importers are deciding to move on, privatization, in my view, is the only way to go. That you've got government owning the port, the infrastructure, and you've got private operators looking at the port, like you have now in Durban, for example. So we don't have time because we cannot afford having a port that is operating at below 50-60% of what it should do. And it's a couple of things. It's lack of maintenance. It is, unfortunately, labor issues with trade unions having a dominant position still. So not an easy one, and something to really get grey around as we on the verge of really, really capturing opportunities. We need to be able to fulfill orders. And I think that's what Siobhan's saying, that a lot of cost is being absorbed because we tend to extend lead times, but that very same lead times then unfortunately kicks back as part of cost, and it does kick back to producer level, which put a squeeze on that. So a tricky one.
Oh, well, we don't expect it to be solved overnight, so we'll give you to next week to come back and let us know it's done, Rico. Good luck with that one. It really is affecting the industry. I know a hotelier in Cape Town who is air freighting in the refit for an entire hotel at exorbitant cost simply because of the troubles with that port. On a brighter note, though, in the first answer there, you had the talk of the growth of the domestic market. This, Miguel, is good news for people like yourself who are selling wine and selling great wine all over the country. Is that volume, that figure that was mentioned, the growth to, I think it was 450 million litres, reflecting in your establishments, Miguel? And what trends are you seeing that you think will lead into this year in terms of people not just drinking more wine, but hopefully drinking better wine and drinking with a little bit of excitement and experimentation?
Definitely, Dan. It's something that what we've seen post-COVID is the consumer have traded up. And something I'd like to touch base, Rico mentioned earlier about relationship and Siobhan mentioned about marketing, two key aspects in the local market, and something that brand building is crucial in the evolving, ever-changing market. And especially I refer to Senton. Why is when we look at our group, we are just over 100 properties nationally, and Senton contribute over 50% of the group wine sales. So it shows you in the richest square mile in Africa, in that 1.6 kilometer by 1.6 kilometer, the amount of wine that get consumed on a daily basis. And we are only 3 hotels in Senton. When you look at the other operators around us, everyone is busy. So it's an aspect where building relationship, marketing, and brand building. And as much as I don't like mentioning brands, but in a market that's saturated with wine producers and quality is getting better and better, what differentiates the producer from the rest and what will make the consumer choose the wine on the wine list? And on the subject of on the wine list, what we've seen post-COVID, not only in South Africa, but globally, is wine lists are getting smaller and shorter. And that is because hotels does not want to carry inventory like it used to be pre-COVID. So what we're seeing now is, and the message to the industry and something that we would like to see more is, when we look at a brand, let's say like Villa Fonte, which in a very short period of time, 5-6 years, they have captured a broad-based clientele here around Johannesburg, which no other South African brand or wineries has done per se. So it shows you that there is a potential, there are wine drinkers out there, but they need to be kept informed. Social media is free to use, but how many wineries are using social media? I look at certain countries where alcohol is prohibited when to an extent, but they have Instagram pages, they're posting about wine, they're getting 500, 1,000 reaction, whereas the South African wineries hardly get 50 reaction on their Instagram page. So these are aspects that my advice, especially for us on trade, is build a relationship with the sommeliers and work your way through the wine list. It's only through consistent relationship. Listing a wine is not the job done. Listing a wine is only the beginning. It's about following up and I'll give you a good example, Dan, and there's Rico, there's Siobhan there, is when I compare the South African wine industry and the rest of the world, when we list an international wine, either 6, 12, or 18 bottles, you will have somebody from the other side of the world that will give a call and say, thank you for the listing. Here locally, you will have a producer where we'll move 50,000 bottles annually. You'll never get a call. You only get a call when actually you delist the wine. They ask, oh, what happened to the wine? Why is it delisted? So, and these are the common perception among sommeliers globally, especially in America and in Europe. They say South African wines are great, but the relationship aspect is missing. And this is something that the producers needs to build on if we have to grow it on trade and in hospitality sector worldwide. So what is changing? We are seeing a lot of alternative varieties coming to the fore. They will never be the volume of Sauvignon Blanc or Merlot, but it is exciting to see grapes like Asiatico, Albarino, Palomino coming to the fore. There's better excitement. Cap Classic is on fire. Recently, we've seen Wineful in America talking about Cap Classic among the top 6 sparkling wine of the world. There are traction, there are actions, and there are energy, there are recognition about South African wines. But the three main aspects, I'd say, is branding, marketing, and relationship. And that's, if we can get that right as a country, as an industry, we will be selling 10 times more wines, both locally and internationally.
I want to get a response to that export comment from Evan and Siobhan in a moment, but I do want to ask you something about your domestic audience. And for me, it's quite an important one. Something I've noticed, and I've spoken to 1 or 2 sommeliers, and I think it seems to be the case, but I'll get the authoritative word from you, Miguel. And that is on the perception of our top level brands from an audience that not that long ago might have rocked up at a Marble or a Saint or a Zoo or a Tang as one of the see and be seen kind of restaurants, along with having great kitchens and menus and food, and might have ordered a bottle of Mouton Chandon, a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, or something that was flash and international. Now starting to see labels like you mentioned Villafonte, like Molyneux, like Sardi, seeing these labels in a similar light and wanting to be drinking these wines because that's the perception that they now have. Is that accurate? Is that starting to happen in your judgment?
You are spot on, Dan, with your comments. It is a fact there's a better embracement of the top end wines we have in this country. And that's, you were mentioning about Moët Chandon. And we all know for the last 4 years, Moët and Veuve couldn't supply our domestic market. And we are still into a predicament where allocation has been dropped by over 70%, purely because of shipping globally and for many other factors. So the market have turned towards other brands and over premium Cap Classic. We've seen the rise of, let's say, Cronet Demi-Sec, their Blanc de Blanc Night Nectar. We would have thought we would have a Demi-Sec Cap Classic at nearly 550 Rand cost. You know, it shows you that the local market are receptive to the pricing change, but they are also want quality, but they want to be seen with brands that are actually active and dynamic out there in the social media sphere.
Which again links back to those comments about export markets. Siobhan, how fair is Miguel's assessment in terms of the jobs that wineries are doing? And I realize we're speaking very broadly and a little vaguely, but on maintaining and managing those relationships with wineries around, with distributors around the world, with retailers, with restaurants. Can we improve on it? Do we need to do a bit more work there?
Dan, I think Miguel's spot on. Relationships, building that bond, telling the story about the brand, getting out there. You've got that balance between working with a trade and working with a consumer. So I think it's very important to build a relationship with the trade. You see the brands that are really making inroads are the ones that go out there, they meet, give Ken Forrester an example. He's out there, he's meets with the buyers, he's on the streets, he makes it his mission to go to the areas where his brands are growing and really show that he's interested. But it's very important also to start building that reputation with consumers, and it's hard work. The easiest way, I think, in terms of reach would be through social media. And there's some easy ways of doing it, and you see some brands really getting it right. And he gave a great example, with the Cap Classique. And I think it's finding that sweet spot and continuing to do it. I always say you just repeat. You don't do it once and walk away. You've got to keep doing that. And you will find that eventually, if you're speaking the right language, you've got the sort of right quality brand, and you give the right cues, you'll get that traction. But it's hard work, and you need more brands to do it. Miguel touched on something which is really exciting, and that's the growth of Cap Classique. We're seeing that globally. And I think that's a huge opportunity for South Africa. It's a category that can really draw consumers from an image perspective. We make high quality Kaplisik in this country, and they're looking for it. There was an article recently about Prosecco dropping off, but yet, I think there's still an opportunity for South Africa to slot in, and I think there's lots of work that needs to be done. I'm not saying people aren't doing it, but you just got to keep doing it. And I think when things are tough, you can't back off. You've just got to keep finding smarter ways to do it. But relationships, marketing, key. 100%. And Miguel touched on something which I also think is important, particularly working with on-trade. There was always that analogy that your brand is built on trade. And I think you've got to get to those key influencers. And we've been doing a lot of work with sommeliers. It's hard work. But if you build that relationship with them, and, we brought quite a few to South Africa, it pays off because they become influencers. They have huge social media followings as well. So not only will you get your brand listed, they will support your brand and they become ambassadors for your brand as well. But you've got to put the time in.
The value of a Twitter post from Miguel Chan. It's any reason we have him on the show, really. Sends you stratospheric. Your thoughts on that export space, Evan? It's challenging, and you've got a whole host of top brands that you're trying to direct to different parts of the world, work out with them where to go, who to speak to, how to do it. What's going to drive that narrative for you in 2024? How are you working with it? And do you agree with Miguel, with Siobhan, that maybe there is a little room for improvement in that space?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything either of them said. I think the challenges. I don't know why I'm sounding so pessimistic this evening. I really am not. I'm excited for what the year holds, but the challenges are real. It's where we're lucky with that access to information. You've got things like Vivino, you've got websites, you've got Instagram pages, as Miguel said. The world has information on their fingertips. You can jump onto your phone and read whatever you want about any wine brand. So when I look at it, we largely, because we're a business to business, if that makes sense, we worry about the gatekeepers first and foremost. So you've got to get into the gatekeepers. If you look at mass retail or even sommeliers in various countries, you've got to get them on board. You've got to get them excited and to give South Africa a chance. And that's where, again, the storytelling, you mentioned Ken Forrester does a great job. We've got these wonderful characters, and then we've got some really efficient businesses here. So that combination gives us a chance. How do we get that wine off the shelf or off a wine list? Then we've got to start to market directly to the consumers and market generically, and that's Sean would probably talk to that point more than I can, but we're up against it. When you compare yourself to the budgets of wines of Australia and certainly the perception. I was in Dubai towards the end of last year at our Importers Trade Show. And it was incredible. They had a room of 140 producers from around the world, some of the great wines in the world. And in a room, if you've been through that Dubai airport, Le Clos is their fine wine sort of outfit. And that room had 12 of us in it. And we were fortunate to be the only, through Bockenhurst Kloof, be the only producer in that room. And it was really interesting. So you had certainly 11 of the great brands in the world and sort of Bockenhurst Kloof waving South Africa's flag. And just to chat to people in Dubai, which is, as you know well, it's an absolute melting pot of a city and a region. So chatting to people from all around the world on their perception of South Africa. And it struck me. I had a conversation with a really charming French gentleman who had a Danish wife. And his view is that he would never drink South African wine. And I said, but out of interest, why not? And I kind of contextualized it by saying, surely we qualify by being amongst these great brands. Wouldn't you like to taste the Bockenhurst Kloof Semillon? And he contextualized, he's justified it by saying there's certain things that countries do really well. He said France is the world's best, producer of wine and cheese. And he kind of went through a list. I said, then what's South Africa known for? And he said rugby, poverty, and HIV. And it was it was an incredibly insulting comment because it showed, just absolute ignorance. But it did strike me that a lot of people do look at that. They want to drink wines from France. And we mentioned Prosecco earlier, Champagne is on a premium side, and Prosecco, the Dolce Vita from Italy, these are exciting things. So we've got to try and change the perception around the world. And that either takes massive budgets to do huge generic campaigns, or it takes us kind of, getting into the trenches a bit and rolling up our sleeves, which either through us traveling and kind of waving the South African flag around the world, which unfortunately does cost money when you're on the rand over there, or by bringing people in here. And I think it was Miguel which one mentioned wine tourism, what an important role that plays. And that really is going to be vital. Build brands locally, build them domestically, build them with real stories, build them with real quality, because we can do that. And that should hopefully start to translate one glass at a time internationally. The one point that wasn't touched on, and sorry to take too much time, is the world's, call it the developed world's view on sustainability and organics. And sustainability, we could have the greatest stories in the world, but they look at a lot of the more developed countries and wine drinking populations, look at it and say, there must be a localization happening here. If you're in Italy, we must drink Italian wine. If we're in Europe, we must drink European wine. It's not good for the environment and carbon, the carbon state of the world for us to be shipping wine from the Southern Hemisphere. So that is going to play a bigger and bigger role. So although sustainability as a country is important to us, it's got many different layers. And I think as South Africans, sustainability is, maybe I'm talking personally, more the human factor at the moment. That's vital. We've got to create jobs. We've got to keep our economy going, everything else. The environment is important, but creating jobs in the wine industry is vitally important, where a lot of the wine drinkers out there don't see it that way. So we've got to come up with a sustainable message from South Africa, and WOSA has done a great job to this point to get it out there, that it's absolutely in our nature, and sustainability is so important to us that they should still be drinking our wines because we take it seriously. But that is going to be a bit of a challenge, I think, going forward too.
It's a collective effort needed, and that's where the work of people like Rico becomes so important, working with Evan and his peers. You might have noticed we have gone live on Instagram as of last week for the first time. We're still test driving a little, but nice to see some members of the wine industry online and watching. I see Sir de Villiers Graaf, who's a trustee of the Cape Wine Auction I'll be hosting in a few weeks, is watching online. So to Bongani Mataboge joining us from Cuba, Tom Orpin's on there, Marcel Nicholas, Morgan Stain, a few others. Welcome all of you. Lovely to have you watching on the show. And lovely to have Grant Sauls, who preempts a question I wanted to ask Rico anyway. Grant asking, how are the small wineries competing against the current mergers and acquisitions for the international market in South Africa, based on the fact that they don't have the financial backing or marketing resources? It is an interesting space. I wanted to know from you, Rico, what you felt 2024 might bring in terms of this trend of more foreign players coming into the market. We obviously welcome the injection of capital and the acknowledgement of South Africa's wine status if these big people are coming in and backing us and buying our wine estates and supporting us. But as Grant suggests, it does come with challenges to those smaller estates. Where is that space in 2024, and what's your view on the balancing act therein?
Dan, this is where it gets tough to run with averages. Just quickly on Evan's point about sustainability, I think we've got world-class systems, and part of the projects that we're putting together now is to have real facts, because we deal with protectionism from certain markets. And one of the things that we're busy putting together with Siobhan and team is to be able to showcase what exactly is our carbon footprint. We've got the emission on farm. We know what the wineries are. We know that a ship's emission is 8 times lower than a truck from Italy. So we do need to also play proactive, and it's then the way of execution. Dan, your answer, look, it's tough. If you were to ask me about challenges, I would probably list cash flow as the one challenge at the moment. And the reason for that would be twofold. The number one would be that we've had a lower 2023 crop, 12 to 14% down. And if you think manufacturing, that does have an impact on the crush and the fixed cost and variable cost. But the biggest thing, the carryover from 22, was those huge cost spikes. You'll remember chemicals going bananas, 200%, and fuel and all of that. So I think it's fair to say that at grassroots level, most of the smaller producers, even the bigger ones, and these wineries do need to have a good bank manager. It's a tough marginal cycle to trade through, and it really depends now on the strategy and positioning. We often say that a lot of the sector to counter Eskom, for example, has gone solar, but we tend to forget that to go solar or go green costs money. Hey, you need to pay for that solar, and that's part of the risk hedging. 2 comments on the consolidation. I think it's a very positive, Dan, that we do see the investment coming in. I will keep on saying that it gives us access to distribution. I had a very positive discussion with Heineken, for example, last week on the Africa strategy, and a lot of positivity on their strats. But we will see change of ownership going along. I mean, recently, Landskroon was sold off to a South African. And I think it's positive for what will happen to tourism, what will happen to positioning, what will happen to image and brand. But Dan, the reality on the production curve is that we now have a declining production volume. And it does mean that wineries will have to right size. These factories will have to right size themselves. And we will even see facilities that goes into mothballing or become something else. So it's unheard of, but we will lose 60 to 80 million liters over the next 5 years, which is really climatic as well as financial. It will put us in a better position, but one needs to have empathy with those wineries that probably will not be here in 5-6 years. So mixed bag, and one need to be specific. Tourism, huge impact. I mean, it's got, for these small industry players, and we've got 400 of the 528 are SMEs, turnover below 10 million. They are highly reliant on direct sales, and that's where the tourism part kicks in again. So exponential growth in that segment, I think it's a huge positive.
We've had plenty of challenges discussed on the show so far. We've had, I think, some good ideas, some good suggestions, but the clear message is there is a lot of work to be done. And people in the wine industry, South Africans in general, are pretty good at rolling up their sleeves and getting that work done. So I share in the positivity. I want to end the show on a really nice big high note with all of you, though, and tap into some of your personal expertise as you look ahead to the rest of 2024, starting with you, Evan, but I'll run through everybody. Give me a wine or two that you feel is going to excite you and hopefully excite the rest of us this year. And by wine, both brand and varietal, whichever comes to mind. And then if we were to have this conversation at the end of December as we're breaking for Christmas, what, Evan, would have made 2024 a really good year for you?
Put me on the spot automatically. So, which is the favorite child? Then I guess the wines that I want to see succeed this year, because I think it does play a big role for South Africa, are the scalable, really good value wines. So one of what Rico just said now, I think, and probably to Grant's question, where the challenges and how do the smaller guys do it? To me, one of the big challenges is that our small guys aren't scaling quick enough. The demand's there and everything else. So if we could scale those top end wines, that'll be amazing. Until we can get there, we need to rely on some really good iconic South African wines to fly the flag for us. Personally, I'm really excited about white blends still. I know that the stats tell me it's not the biggest category in the world, but I really think we need to double down on our Chenin Blanc based blends when it comes to white wines, and you can still find some incredible value there, all the way up then to premiumization. I'm purposely going in circles so I can forget the second part of your question. But what would make this a really good year for me? I think it's to see overall success. There's so many other challenges and sort of the context of the port, etc. I think I want to see that rising tide that lifts all boats. So I'm not going to speak for Vinimark or the brands we associated with. I would like to see generally the smaller guys do really well. I love the fact that Heineken's got a good African strategy. That rising tide lifts all boats. So I want to see the industry generally in a far healthier position in a year's time by getting people to drink more South African wine.
All right, I think we'll all agree with those. It'd be lovely to report back on that in 11.5 months' time. I see Raymond Ndlovu, chair of the Cape Wine Auction until last year, and still the committee's watching. Hello, Raymond. And Andrew Panayiotou is watching on Facebook. Hidden Valley Winery, says Andrew, with an endorsement for another one of our Stellenbosch gems. Miguel, what about you? What either brand or varietal do you think is going to have a real impact, is getting you excited for 2024? And what's going to make Miguel Chan a happy man come Christmas at the end of the year?
It's Dan, you put all of us on the spot here. It's always tough to choose when we have such a diversity of style and such greatness out coming from our industry. I will mention 5 brand and 5 style very briefly. If I look at the Alhide vineyards across the Chenin Blanc range, the Messine, whatever Jean Smith did his birthday today, doing across the range also incredible South African wine. Pinotage, what Ashbourne by Anthony Hamilton Russell and Emil Russell doing with Pinotage in the Ashbourne range. It's something to give a breath of fresh air in terms of drinkability, in terms of zest to the category, including their white blend, which is quite an unusual Semillon Chardonnay Sauvignon Blanc, and Restless River with their Cabernet Sauvignon. As much as we talk about Stellenbosch, there are many great Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon, but singularity on a wine list, Restless River stood out. Cap Classic, what Peter Ferreira and Anne Ferreira is doing through their Cap Classic range, their Blanc de Blanc, it's something to die for. And last but not least, I just opened a bottle of the 2021 Series M by Villafonte, which will be released on the 1st of April. I'm not saying much more, but it's possibly the best to date they've ever released. And it's super, super exciting to see the Bordeaux category, which is super strong, super much in demand across a broad base of clientele, to see those premium category doing so well and getting fine-tuned every year. We will never be Bordeaux, we'll never be First Grove, but we sit somewhere in between Bordeaux and Napa Valley and Margaret River. And that is so cool to actually work with those wines on the floor. Yeah.
Some terrific recommendations, and a reminder of such an important part of the South African wine identity that so many of our producers are now cheerfully accepting. We're not trying to be anybody else. We're South African, and we're pretty good at being South African. Some of that wine mentioned there included the Peter Ferreira range, that Bird Song, beautifully dry Cup Classique, which I had at the end of last year. And so far this year, I think Raymond Ndlovu's Black Elephant Zero Dosage is about as close as I would get to dry January during the course of this month. Let's head over to Siobhan. Siobhan, the varietal, the wines that will be exciting you think, and us by extension this year, and what's going to make WOSA's Christmas party a particularly joyful affair if all goes according to plan.
I presume if my face is on the screen, I'm up. Sorry, Dan, I lost you. The question that I've been pondering over is exactly that. For me, and I mentioned it earlier, Cup Classique is a huge opportunity for us. And not just the high-priced Cup Classique, but also the sort of more entry middle, so cheering through Cup Classique. I think Graham Beck is beautifully poised to do that, but there's so many brilliant Cup Classiques ready to go hit the market. So for me, that's something we have to grab that trend and run with it because it's ready. And then I think, I agree with Evan in terms of the white blends. I think we do those so well. So Chenin-based blends, excellent. But then a little passion of mine as well as the lighter style reds. I think there is opportunity to explore that more in terms of the Cinsaults and the Grenache. But I really think we mustn't miss the boat on Cup Classique. We are doing them so well and we can compete so well. So that for me is where I lie.
It's a category that is full of excitement, as are those lighter reds. Had some of Erica Obermeier's Cinsault last night. Granted, she's incapable of making a poor wine, but that was a particular delight. Rico, let's wrap up with you as we come to the end of what's been a fascinating evening for terrific guests. What wine is going to be dazzling people at the dinner table over the course of this year, and what is really going to make you a happy man come the end of 2024?
Dan, my wine will be brandy. So I predict that we will again be the brandy world champs, and it's a category with fortified wine, which I think we should elevate. I think we will have a number of best vineyards in the world announced, which will just pump our tourism. And I also had Cap Sick up here. But to me, what will make me happy, we are launching the new strategy on the 23rd of May. There's a SA Wine Summit. And what will make me happy if we get to November and I could have producers and wineries having a consistency of messaging, and we've got full buy-in into the tactical way we play. So that to me, Dan, will be a bit of a functional output, but that will be a great test if we've got full buy-in and the industry bodies and the producers align and we do what we can do, and that's a little bit of tactical play in the trenches. I think we could wow the world and navigate all the challenges.
All right, some high hopes, but the right people to turn those hopes into reality through the course of the year. I've been trying to work out my own thoughts on what wine to look ahead to. And the challenge is one that we've talked about so often on this show. We do so much stuff so well. How do you decide what to make and what not to make? But I suspect we're going to see a couple more greater Cirticos emerge in the course of this year. And we're also going to see one or two more of our international players. But I also think on my travels this year, I'm just going to see more and more South African wine on where wine lists at some of the great restaurants of the world. And that will make me very, very happy indeed, as have all four of my guests by joining me on the show today. I think that has extended to those who've been watching, especially our guests over on Instagram. It's been great to see all the traffic there this evening. So guys, thank you very much indeed. Siobhan, Evan, good luck in taking that South African wine message to the world and ensuring that nobody's drinking anything but South African wine by the end of 2024. Miguel, you and I have many glasses of wine to share over terribly important meetings on that deck at the Santon Sun. So we'll see you soon. And Rico, you don't have an enviable job, but you've got one you're well equipped to take on. And I think if we see a more united South African wine industry this year, that really will be the biggest driver towards achieving everything we've spoken about on the show this evening. So best of luck to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Have a wonderful, wonderful wine year. And we look forward to having you all back on again soon. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
So there we go. What a collection. Rico Basson, who's now our governing and holding body on wine in South Africa. Siobhan Thompson with her team at WOSA. Miguel Chan, the sommelier extraordinaire at the Southern Sun Empire. And Evan Alexander, old friend of mine, who's now directing traffic for exports at Vinimark, together, giving us what I think, by and large, is a fairly upbeat picture of the year ahead. Certainly not denying the challenges that exist, but looking at ways which we can get through them. And collectively, we are well placed to do exactly that. Thank you all so much for joining us on the show. I'll see you back again live on Thursday. I'll be coming to you from Cape Town with a couple of surprise guests on the show then. Have a great week. Happy drinking. Keep supporting South African wine. We'll see you Thursday. Goodbye.